Greetings. Welcome to the Captive Desk. Please join me in welcoming Steve McRae to the Captive Desk. For many of us, Steve needs no introduction, but for those new to YouTube or new to the communities, he's going to get one. Steve is the host of the Nonsequitur Show. There are over 600 videos posted there with over 7 million views. From the description, Non-Sequitur follows a vision of content that is rich in optimism, sarcasm, and seeks to balance entertainment with information, open minds, and provoke thought. Steve also has another channel aptly called Steve McRae. If 600 videos isn't enough to binge watch, you can catch over 1,300 videos posted there. From the description, where people can come bring their presentations and thoughts on science and philosophy. Welcome to the Captive Desk, Steve. I've been watching and enjoying your content over the years, the many debates and discussions you have participated in, and those you have hosted, and the many great guests you have had on too. I've been looking forward to having a talk with you. Steve, welcome.
Wow, that I gotta tell you, I've done a lot of these, and that's probably one of the best introductions I've ever seen in my life. You've done some serious homework on that. I'm flattered, actually. Wow, thank you. No, it's good to be here.
Thank you.
Happy Easter Sunday.
Happy Easter to you and everybody watching. Happy Easter. So, Steve, if you can take us back before YouTube and share with us a bit about your early years. Were you raised in a religious atmosphere? Were your parents religious? Were you ever a believer?
I was not raised in a religious atmosphere. My mom's Jewish, so culturally, I do consider myself Jewish. I have affinity towards, the Jewish culture. I respect it immensely, but we never really practiced it. My dad was a Protestant, and on his side of the family, it was a lot of different variations when it came to the Protestant denominations. I have some Methodist, some Lutheran, some Baptist. I might even have some Catholics, which are obviously non-Protestant, mixed in as well. But we had pretty much an eclectic background in my family. My brother was a Jehovah's Witness for some time, but I became actually, believe it or not, Mormon when I was 17. So I was baptized Mormon, but then I went straight into the military. I went to the Naval Nuclear Power Program, and almost within months I kind of started falling away because you join the military, and military is not really known for following the same kind of codes that the Mormons follow, and so I kind of started falling away. Then much later on, I pretty much realized that Mormonism was not for me. I rejected it, especially in 2008 when the LDS Church had actively tried to seek against Proposition 8, for marriage in California. And I thought to myself, why would a church who claims to be the one true church of God on the face of the earth care about this particular topic? And why would they interject themselves into political things? Because I am obviously pro-gay marriage. I think people have the right to marry anybody they want as long as they're consenting adults. As they say, go with God. But at that point, I stopped being a theist. And so now I'm known as the a-holy Pope of agnosticism on Twitter and other social medias, because I have the position that I neither believe there's a God, nor do I believe that there isn't a God. And from that standpoint, I basically just have people on to discuss topics relating to epistemology, not really so much theology, but maybe philosophy of theology, perhaps, and then philosophy of religion.
And speaking of the nuclear program, could you tell us a little bit about your graduate of Naval Nuclear Power School, Knowles Atomic Power Laboratories?
Yeah, that was quite some time ago.
What was that about?
Well, Knowles Atomic Power Laboratories was Prototype. That was in Windsor Locks, Connecticut. It was called an S1C, submarine first generation combustion engineering submarine that you basically have a hands-on training to. So that's after you graduate nuclear power school. Nuclear power school program is the whole pipeline is about 2 years from when you actually go in to fully get qualified, where you can actually operate a nuclear power plant. My particular power plant was a 150 megawatt reactor. It was what's called a D2G reactor core, which was destroyer second generation made by Westinghouse. But it's a lot of training on reactor operations, physics, mathematics, nuclear kinematics. We had chemistry, water control. And they really want you to be informed of how the nuclear reactor operates, because you're out at sea and you're the one operating these things. They want you to know every casualty. They want you to know everything about that power plant. So if something goes wrong, you're able to, in real time, handle it. That's the whole reason why people go through that amount of training for nuclear power. Yeah. I was class of 8088, if anybody asks.
And so were you big in science then in school? Was it, is that what led up to it? Or was it just a decision in a career field type thing?
I really had an interest way back when. And I say interest as far as, you could possibly have an interest as a grade schooler or junior high, but I liked fundamental particle physics and I liked astrophysics. But I quickly realized that math is hard. I didn't have the skill set to really do the level of math that you really have to be an astrophysicist. Highest I probably would be competent enough to do would be a Calc level 2. And on my main channel, I have numerous videos dealing with Calc 1 and Calc 2. But the level of mathematics beyond that is just something that I just didn't think that I was capable of doing. And so I'm confident enough with my basic math skills. And I still have a major interest in astrophysics. As you know, we talked about before we went live, I've had Dr. Hugh Ross just on recently. And we talked about Dr. Jason Lyle's synchronicity convention dealing with light travel. And, I've had him on many. Actually, that's funny is I did a show for about a year with Dr. Ross's organization's Reason to Believe. Me and Dr. Fuzz Rana did a show called Agree to Argue, where we discussed a lot of these things in real time. But yeah, I still have an interest in it. I'm fascinated by it. I have astrophysicists on quite frequently, but as far as like ever want to be one, no, it's hard. So, but it is amazing. I mean, astrophysics is fascinating. Black holes, there's something about it growing up. I was enamored by what a black hole was and what would happen around a black hole and how time and space interact with each other around a black hole. I, for some reason, thought it was not quite magic, but I thought it was like this really goes to the heart of what we think we understand when it comes to gravity and stuff. And so, yeah, I always found science fascinating, but my dad had talked to me going into the nuclear program because he felt that if I graduated nuclear power school, I could pretty much go anywhere because they're highly sought after. And there is some truth to that. But unfortunately, when I got out, I went back into retail and I kind of got away from any kind of engineering field.
Yeah, there was, I was fascinated. There was, was it a Disney movie or something about the black hole?
Oh yeah. I remember that.
Yeah. And it's always been wow type thing.
That was one of Disney's first, I think that was their first PG-13 movie because it involved a death.
Oh, okay.
Maximilian, I think was that the robot or the doctor? But the robot had the little spinning things. It was pretty graphic for a Disney movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And speaking of school, could you tell us what was your best and worst subjects when you were in school?
Okay. Well, my worst subject. Okay, the hardest subject I ever took was macroeconomics. I did get a B in it. I was on the dean's list for my college at a 4.0. For a while, but one of the other courses I took was from Extension College in Texas A&M, and I didn't understand macroeconomics. It was rote memorization, so I managed to get a B, but it was just something that I could not conceptually wrap my head around when it came to like Keynesian supply and demand curves and some of the differentials that were used to have aggregate supply, demand, and all that stuff. And so, yeah, that was probably my most difficult. I think my best course, I don't know. I aced physics in college. I took some computer programming course. They were easy. I don't. You know what? I tell you, I think my best course that I enjoyed the most was public speaking. Believe it or not, it was the one course where you actually had to get up in front of people and talk about things, and you had to minimize things like vocalized pauses, which we all do. Those are the ums, the ands, the you knows. So when you have that course, you literally learn how to communicate more effectively. And I think without that course, I would have never even had any channel on YouTube because I was not an effective communicator. Or I was average, I guess. I did some training prior to that but nothing to the extent I'm doing now. So I think that if I recommended any course to anybody, take public speaking. It is well worth it.
My part of my son's degree, and he has a business degree, was they had to do the stand up in front of the audience, and he had to put on his suit and everything and pretend like, yeah, you were doing your serious business discussions and everything. And he said it was hard, but after he did it, he said he was glad he did it because he learned a lot.
Yep. I have a friend who is taking that course this semester, and they've told me the exact same thing. They were very fearful at the beginning. They didn't feel confident. And most people have a fear of public speaking, or at least a lot of people do. If you ask the general person, what's your greatest fear? They're going to be fear of getting in front of an audience and speaking. But once you do it numerous amount of times, it just becomes like whatever. You don't care at that point. You just don't. But you want to make sure that what you're putting out as far as the information, that it is communicating effectively where somebody is learning from it. And that's one of the most difficult things. Editing your presentation, consolidating it, getting the points in the presentation communicated to the audience where they're not just sitting there going, what the hell is this guy talking about? And when it comes to a lot of the topics that I particularly talk about on the Non-Sequitur Show and my channel, that's not an easy thing to do because we talk about some pretty complicated stuff sometimes.
And other than the YouTube that we all know about, and obviously the school and everything you've gone through, I noticed that you play a bit of guitar too.
If you want to call it that. I mean,
I saw some pictures on Facebook.
Yeah, I don't ever do any lead or shred, nothing of that kind. I mean, I'm just basically somebody who can play background chords to like Metallica songs. That's it.
And any other hobbies?
I mean, I do a lot of hobbies, but I really don't have time for them. I like fishing. I used to like building electronic projects with breadboards and things of that nature because I was a Radio Shack store manager for many years. So I was constantly around electronic stuff. But no, not really nowadays. I've been so busy. I went back to work full time, and I am just literally at work almost every day at this point. I work 6 days a week sometimes. And so it is not really allowing me much time to do anything else.
Okay, Steve. So are you an atheist?
I am not. Yes, I'm not an atheist. The reason being, and I know this has been very controversial for quite some time, although it shouldn't be, I adhere to philosophical uses of terms, just like I would biological uses of terms if we're talking about biology. If you're talking about the theory of evolution and you mention evolution, people are going to understand it has to deal with the change of allelic frequency or has to do with, heritable traits. It's not something to do with chemical evolution or just change. And also the word theory doesn't mean just guess. So when I talk about atheism, I'm doing so from a standpoint as if you were to take a course in philosophy, take a course in atheology or atheism, it would be used as the belief that there are no gods, that God does not exist, that the universe is devoid of any kind of being that has intentionality or intelligence, that somehow the universe is caused by him or is continued by him, and so, or her, or whatever. But I don't have that belief that there is no God. I will say that I don't believe most of the versions of Christianity. I think most of them are false. I believe that there is no hell, at least not described by the fire and brimstone. And if you don't believe in Jesus' resurrection, you're going to be burning forever. That makes no sense to me because that is not a property of an omnibenevolent being. So there's a contradiction to me there. And I don't think a rational, benevolent being would say, look, your entire existence after you die is solely dependent upon a single state on a ontological proposition. That is not a rational being. And I believe if God is all-knowing and intelligent and, omnibenevolent, then they're not going to be that irrational. So I do believe that stuff's all BS. However, when it comes to like the conditions of the universe, I remain agnostic because there's really only 3 possibilities. There's what's called a brute fact, the universe just exists. There's an infinite regress where there's just a long chain of causalities, or there's some necessary being. And if there is a necessary being, there's the potential to be an intelligent necessary being. The necessary being could be anything. It could be quantum fluctuations, could be a necessary being. I tend to brute fact only because I just don't have a deep understanding of is a necessary being necessary? Some theologians I know, like Dr. Josh Rasmussen, had written a book called Necessary Existence with Alexander Press. I've tried reading it. It is beyond my level, but he argues that the universe has to have a necessary being. And he might be right. He very well might be right. But the argument then goes, well, even if there's a necessary being, is that something that has intentional states? Is that an actual intelligent agent that created and sustains the universe? That part I remain agnostic. So when people ask me, are you an atheist? I have to say, from a philosophical standpoint, I'm agnostic, because I do treat atheism as the position there are no gods, period. Not just, local, one particular version of God. It is, the universe is devoid of gods. So that's how I use the terms. So when you ask me, hey, what is your philosophical position? I have to be congruent with the way these terms are used in philosophy, and so I'm agnostic. A long way I went to say no. Sorry.
That was a great answer. And speaking of, do you think divine hiddenness? I watched your video. Do you think that's still in the best and worst argument category for God?
Yeah, I don't put it in the worst. I do put it in one of the best arguments. The reason why I hold more to divine hiddenness is because I am a non-resistant non-believer. So if there is a deity, especially a theistic, personable deity, that wants to have a relationship with me, then he has to put forth some sort of effort, because I'm open to having that relationship if he exists. One, I like to know the truth, but I'm not, saying, oh, there is no God, there's nothing to have a relationship with. It's like, okay, I'm a non-resistant non-believer. Where you at? And divine hiddenness is the argument that God isn't showing himself or giving a person sufficient reasons to believe in him. And if you really look at like modernity in 2023, we are not seeing God do certain things like you would suspect if he still exists from 2,000 years ago. Because back then, there were all these things that God did. There were signs. And I'm not saying like God has to show a sign, but God interacted with man, supposedly, especially in the Old Testament and in the form of Jesus in the New Testament. We're not seeing anything like that. We don't see bodies rise up from the graves. We don't see the earth stop spinning or the sun stay in place. We obviously, this is people would argue the miracle of Fatima, but we don't see these things. But even on the individual level, if God would just go, hey, yo, dude, Steve, yeah, I exist, let's have a chat, I would be cool with that. But especially if your entire salvation is based upon this epistemic disposition toward a proposition, whether you believe or don't believe, I just find that to be nonsensical. It's not congruent what I would define with a being that says, hey, I'm all-knowing and I'm omnibenevolent. They would not want somebody to spend eternity burning in hell or away from them when all they have to do is go, yeah, hey, by the way, I exist. Why is it based upon a belief state? That makes no sense.
And just a little self-plug, I have notes for a video on the Fatima prophecies. So
okay,
that's in my notes. That may be, down the road, but it's in my notes.
Awesome.
All right. And were you engaging with people on these discussions before the internet, or?
Wait, there's a time before there's a time before internet. What pre-internet? BI.
How about back to AOL chat?
Yes. I was on AOL chat rooms. I was on what's called BBS systems. Remember those with dial-up bulletin board systems? I did do that, yes. And also, in real lifetime, in my high school, we would discuss some of these topics, maybe not to the degree we do now, because I just didn't have the information back then. And we had these, it wasn't as easy to go find information. Back in my day, we had these big buildings, and I know you're not going to believe this, but they're called libraries, and they had these things called books. And I don't know, there was like this gatekeeper, this mean woman with glasses, older woman that would look at you, disapprovingly if you're talking loud, and then you had to present to them this little card in order to check these printed books out on dead trees that had words written on them. And so it was very difficult, to go read, to learn stuff that way, because you're always checking out books, and which I did, by the way. I lived at the library, and this is one of the things that I still recommend to people today. Even though you have access to the internet, still go to the library and read a book. It just feels different. And I think it's easier to read a book than it is reading a computer screen, because I can read maybe a couple pages of something, and then I tune out on the internet. And so, yes, I was involved on AOL. And again, not to this degree, because I got to tell you, 10 years ago, or even 12 years, I guess maybe it was, I didn't really know much about philosophy. I was one of those people that thought that philosophers sat in a comfy chair, smoking a stogie, having single malt scotch. I didn't realize how deep it was. Yeah, well, no, they still do.
Isn't that what you're doing right now?
I'm drinking coffee in a comfy chair, but it wasn't wrong. I mean, I wasn't wrong by thinking that, but I mean, it's more than that. And I realized that philosophy is the foundation of reason. Logic is philosophy. Reason is philosophy. Knowledge is philosophy. Science is useless. All these people they love science, and people know that I've had a lot of videos that talk about why young earth creationism is wrong. Then they use science, but the people that are there's a word, and this word is not made up by theists. It is scientism. It is the incorrect epistemic usage of scientific principles and methodologies when they're not applicable. People that like science, for some reason, many times discount the fact that without philosophy, science is absolutely useless. You cannot have useful science if you do not have philosophy. It is impossible, because the guiding force for science is called methodological naturalism. That's philosophy. And so I think a lot of people do themselves a disservice when they start talking about scientific evidence, especially when you're dealing with things that are not scientifically evidential. There are many topics that are not dealing with science. And so when you start trying to say, well, what's a scientific evidence for things that are not in the science realm, you have a category error. And I think a lot of people make that mistake. And they just woefully underappreciate the value of understanding basic philosophical concepts, especially logic. And you don't have to be a staunch logician. But if you're dealing with these topics that you don't understand basic logical principles, you're going to get confused easily, and you're going to get manipulated easily, because you're not having a rational mindset to go, wait a minute, that is not a logical or rational argument, and you buy into the nonsense, right? So I highly recommend people at least get a little bit of philosophical education behind them.
And speaking of naturalism, that's one of the biggest straw man, or you would probably know maybe a better wording, but when they use that your methodological and philosophical naturalism mean different things.
They do, yes. Philosophical or ontological naturalists will say there are no elements in the supernatural set. Now, the way I look at it is this, and again, this is my view. Don't take it as gospel. Some agree, some don't agree. So in the academic literature, you're not going to go, hey, citation, Steve, but it does make sense. So my view is, at least this part is fact. For every set, you have a complementary set. In other words, if you're either a duck or you're not a duck, right? So everything in the set of duck does not exist in the complementary set of not duck. They are mutually exclusive and jointly exhaustive. So either one or the other. So either you're a duck or you're not a duck. So everything that's either in the natural set or in the non-natural set, I just happen to call the non-natural set supernatural. And so the methodological naturalist doesn't take a stance on if the supernatural set or non-natural set is empty, but the philosophical or ontological naturalist does. They say, sure, there is a set of non-natural things, because that is basic set theory, but that set happens to be empty. There's a big difference there.
Mm-hmm. So then, before we step up to getting onto your YouTube channels and everything, why don't we take a quick moment here and say hello to everybody in the chat.
Well, hi, chat.
Glad Mike postponed his stream so he didn't overstream me today. And Mike, I appreciate that. Always appreciate Mike. He's a good guy. And
Answers in Atheism?
At Answers in Atheism. And everybody should go check out Mike at Answers in Atheism. And Colossi is here. Always good to see you.
Maybe Mike will do a review of this video when he's done. Give him some content over there.
Making ham, and I'm sure a lot of people are making their hams today. And Scott Duke, always good to see you. Yeah, Mike wants a ham. Everybody wants a ham.
I like ham. Yeah, I like bacon.
I
I love my bacon.
And yeah, Calasia is helping out, putting links in the chat. They'll be in the description too. Thank you. And Bree, hello, Bree. Always great to see you. Thanks for stopping by. And Logan, Chris Moore, Stephanie Trutton. To me, the cosmos is just another name. Let's see. To me, the cosmos is just another name for God. And
Yeah,
I
that's
see
kind
no
of
one denying the cosmos.
that's a pantheist or pantheist viewpoint. Also, the philosopher's god or the goddess Spinoza. But I think I mean I have nothing wrong with that approach, but it's not really what we talk about when we talk about conceptualizing what we mean by God. It's just at that point they're just synonymous terms. They're just two words that mean the same thing. So they have really no distinction between them. So if I use God to mean universe or reality, then I just have three terms that mean the exact same thing that has no distinction between them. But when we use God as a being, an actual being that exists that has intentional states, now there's something that's quite differentially separated from the universe. And so I think words have usages and meanings. Again, I'm not against somebody who uses terms like that. That's what a pantheist or pandeist would say. It's just, to me, it doesn't really provide any additional content.
And I think that's directly addressing kind of what Logan just asked. What is God in that worldview other than the unknown, which AKA God of the gaps?
Yeah, well, science has, I mean, God of the gaps is something you find in science, right? That's when you say, look, I don't understand what I'm observing, therefore God. What science does is it seeks to explain natural phenomenon with natural explanations. That's what science does. But there are certain things that are beyond science's capability of addressing. There are philosophical questions that science just does not have the tool set to address. And so when you start applying stuff that scientific methodology inappropriately to philosophical questions, then you start running into problems, because you don't really have a God into the gaps if it's just an unknown thing in philosophy, like what's called a necessary being. That's not a God of the gaps argument. A God of the gaps argument is something you find specifically in science when you can't explain something in science, then ergo God.
And that's kind of, yeah, you're right in line with the questions. I think you're reading the questions, aren't you, Steve?
No, I have just, when you put it on screen, I can see it.
Right.
I mean,
yeah,
I'm looking at my chat sort of, but it goes by so fast, and I'm more concentrating on you. But yeah, I'm trying to look over to the chat every so often.
Oh, that's what Logan says. People who say God is the cosmos are just hedging and are unwilling to admit their vast ignorance. It's a placeholder.
Yeah, I mean, but here's the thing. When we talk about God, the words have connotations, especially in what's called Frege Church ontology. They have a very specific usage of where you have a signifier and a reference and a referent, and each word has a conceptual relationship to it that may or may not point to an ontological being. In other words, something that exists. And so when we talk about the word God, and I'm talking about as a concept, not a name, there's a difference between God as a name or a label opposed to God as a concept. And so when we talk about God, we're asking people generally, do you believe there's such a being that exists that without them, there would not be a universe? I mean, in a nutshell, that's one way to just kind of look at it. And I think that if you ask the average person, and I plan to do this one of these days, I have questions in my head. I really want to go and just ask people on the street. And if I get a decent enough camera one of these days, if I just break down and get one, I'm going to do that. I really am. And so I think if you ask the average person, when I say the word God, what do you think of? It's going to be something along those lines as some kind of all-powerful being that, created the universe, because that's what the word connotes. That's generally the understanding for the last 2,000 years. We don't have to reinvent the wheel when it comes to God and say, well, God's the universe. Well, yeah, but that means nothing. At that point, it becomes a tautology.
And they're discussing what cosmos means. Cosmos is a Greek word that means world universe. they didn't have Zeus in mind as equal to the universe. Zeus was inside the universe, not the universe. I take it as the separation there.
Yeah, well, so in possible world theory, when we mean the universe, we mean the set of all things. That's what the universe means. The universe means the set of all things, basically. And so that would include reality. That's generally how the word is understood if you just say universe, not like the cosmological universe or cosmogony.
Cosmos. My comment was deleted. I didn't delete any comments. Hello, Spooky. Good to see you. Jay. Hello, Jay. Everybody go over and check out Jay. He's got great content over there. Hunter Biden's laptops or pocket locker. Logan, Pragmatic Crystal. Good to see you. Sending the love. Lots of people sending the love. And Gurr. Good to see you, Gurr. Carol's here. Hello, Carol. Always great to see you. Yeah, Gurr, we talked about the definition of atheism. So, yep, back up a little bit. I did ask Steve about that. Mike says you can make the word God refer to the totality and get closer to Einstein and maybe Spinoza.
Yeah, well, that's the same thing, right? That's just as a God of the philosophers kind of thing, right? And I could get behind people talking about things like spirituality when it comes to the amazing correlations between mathematics and our world. When we look at, patterns and chaos, when we look at fractals, when we look at the Mandelbrot set, when we look at Fibonacci sequence, when we look at all these things about mathematics and how it just seems to blend together wonderfully with ontological things and music and other things like that. I can get behind the God of the philosophers because I think mathematics is amazing and beautiful and majestic. That doesn't mean there's an intelligence behind it, though. And I think that's what we're asking about when we're talking about, does God exist? Is there an intelligence that is the reason why all these things are related together? Did they create all these things? But there's also a problem with that because if there are immutable truths, if there are a priori knowledge that exists without, anybody there to believe in them. I mean, certain fundamental truths like, A equals A or the law of identity, then God doesn't need to exist for those things to exist. They exist in themselves. And that's what's called the eternal principle of eternal verities, that God, even if God exists, he can't not do things that are against fundamental logic, against classical logic. Like, for example, he couldn't cease to exist because he would be a necessary being. Necessary beings must exist. He couldn't make X equals not equal X. He's just something that just is logically impossible to do. So I don't think you would need an intelligent being to make those rules. They just are rules that exist by brute fact. Although it is difficult to account for them. Don't get me wrong, metaphysical accounting is hard. Why do these things exist as a brute fact is a difficult question. But if you accept it as a brute fact that they just do exist, then you don't need a God to explain it. That is your answer. It's a brute fact.
My problem with the problem of using the logical arguments to explain the supernatural is that all that falls apart when you go to the supernatural, because you can do whatever you want if you're going to go into the supernatural, and because you're technically leaving the natural, which means you're no longer following the natural laws, right?
Yeah, exactly. And same thing, like when you do an experiment, you generally have to control as many variables as you can, right? you have your independent and dependent variables. And so if God or some being can change a variable at will, how are you going to determine whether your experiment was a success or not? You have to assume that nobody's messing with your experiment. You have to make that assumption, or you couldn't do science. That is a basic axiom of science. There's like 3 basic axioms of science that people have to adhere to if you want to do science. One, you have to assume there's a reality or universe to observe. You have to make that assumption. You can't prove it, but you have to assume it. You have to assume that you can draw inference by induction from that universe, and you can't prove induction. You can't even justify induction because Hume's problem of induction. We use induction, but you can't justify it. And also that we have to assume that theories that have utility are better theories than ones without utility, right? If theory will predict and describe better than some other theory, let's say you have 2 competing theories, and one of them is more simplistic, it describes more accurately and makes more accurate predictions, we have to assume that theory is the correct one, or at least more correct. That's an assumption. So science has a lot of assumptions going into it, but these are what I consider to be, and I hate to use the word necessary, but is because it's not, but I think it's in this colloquial usage. It's necessary to have these assumptions if you want to do proper science. And I don't mean that modally. I just mean it's just, how are you going to do science if you don't make certain assumptions? Like God's not messing with your experiment. So if the supernatural does exist, yeah, it's going to be hard to do science. So you just have to assume it doesn't, or at least have no status on it. At least that it's not messing with your equipment. So yeah, I absolutely agree with you. If you start adding in all these supernatural things to science, how are you going to do science?
Okay, if you got people agreeing in the chat too that when you step into the supernatural, it kind of becomes meaningless, which is what I always say, that like, can God make a rock too heavy he can't lift? Well, yes, if you're in the supernatural. Well, because okay, there's no longer any rules to hold him back from doing it.
I don't agree, because supernatural doesn't necessarily mean logically possible. Okay, so there's what's called metaphysically possible, logically possible, and there's also what's called nomologically possible. Nomologically possible will deal with like the laws of the universe. So, like, for example, we know you cannot freeze things lower than absolute zero, right? That's a law of the universe. You can't go faster than speed of light, c. That's a nomological law. But there's nothing illogical about it. If I said, hey, I went faster than c, I'm not breaking any laws of logic. But we know that it is a law of the universe. So when we're talking about, can God make a rock so heavy he can't lift it, there's nothing illogical about that. The reason why it's the question is proposed is because a bunch of theists actually got together and said, hey, if God is all powerful, he should be able to do this. But then again, what's called the principle of eternal verities, they said, you're asking God to fail. You're asking God, which is posited as a being that is all powerful. You're saying, hey, you're all powerful, now fail. That's the problem with that statement, because God can only do things which are consistent with his nature or logically possible. But if you were taking a test and you knew all the answers of the questions and you had to get it right because you were your nature is such that you just have to be able to answer every question. You can't lie, right? And you take the test, and you get an A+, but then somebody says, you know what, you failed at failing. You know, that makes no sense, right? It's not a fair thing to say, because you couldn't fail because you're by your nature unable to. So that's the reason why asking God to make a rock so heavy he can't lift it is a question that is asking God to fail more than anything else. It's not illogical, but it's just asking him, asking some being that's positive as a being that cannot fail. And so that's the problem there.
And I want to lead into, what do you think of the fine-tuning argument then for God and the universe?
It's funny. I had the pleasure of talking to, I don't know if you know who Dr. Paul Davies is, a very world-renowned physicist. He, myself, Dr. Hugh Ross, and Dr. Fuzz Rana had a discussion on Agree to Argue on the fine-tuning argument. And I originally, years ago, I was one of those people that subscribed more to the Douglas Adams approach, the puddle argument, and I really discounted the fine-tuning argument much more than I should have. I think a lot of people make that mistake. But then I watched some things by Dr. Luke Barnes, Dr. Alex Malpass, and some other people, and realized that there's a lot more complexity to the fine-tuning argument than just merely saying, hey, this puddle can become sentient and water fills it, and therefore, they think that the size of the puddle was made just for the amount of water. It is a lot more complicated than that. So while I don't think the fine-tuning argument obviously proves God, I do think the fine-tuning argument shouldn't be dismissed by fiat or just out of hand, because if you go, like I said, if you go listen to Dr. Luke Barn, who is a theist, by the way, but he's very, very brilliant, and you listen to Dr. Alex Malpass, who is an atheist, they really do have some great commentary on it. And I think that it is something to ask ourselves. Why is it that the fundamental constants are so related to each other that literally, and I've actually done this, when you have natural units, if you know a certain amount of natural units, you can derive other natural units from them just by matrix theory, which is pretty amazing. Now, if one of those natural units started changing, you couldn't derive the other ones properly. So it does seem fine-tuned for us in some ways. And the counter argument that, well, the universe is fine-tuned for black holes, and 99.9% of the universe is non conducive to life, it's inhospitable, is not an argument, because even if it was non-conducive to life, we still exist in one small speck of this entire universe on this little blue-green ball that's in the middle of nowhere on the Orion arm of the Milky Way. We have life
right there.
We have life, and it's and DNA and organic chemistry allows for this. Now, again, it doesn't get you to God, but it should still make people ponder that this is amazing stuff. And I again, it goes to the awe and wonder of it. Now, do I think intelligent design advocates take it one step too far? Absolutely, right? It doesn't get you to God, but it should at least allow you to posit the questions of why is it that the laws of the universe allow for organic chemistry, that allow for not just life, but sentient beings. That's my view on it.
And I want to mention your avatar with Great Debate Community on it. Could you tell folks real quick what the Great Debate Community is?
Yeah, the Great Debate Community. Well, the original the term came from a guy named what was his name? I'm drawing a blank here. It's been so long. Anyways, it's been around for a while, but the Great Debate Community was a small group of people years ago that I disassociated with, and I made a little group on G Plus that basically got bigger because I had gone on my way to talk about discussions that were somewhat topical at the time. I still have it on Facebook. G Plus went away, obviously, but I still have the Great Debate Community on Facebook. But it basically was a group of people that wanted to discuss these topics on a little bit higher level that was more than just, oh, I don't believe your Sky Daddy exists. And it was the predecessor to the Non-Sequitur Show. His name was Agent of Chaos? I think that was his name. I'm so sorry. I'm terrible at names. I think it was Agent of Chaos. Somebody will probably remember. Agent of Doubt. That's what it was. Agent of Doubt. I drew a blank there. I apologize. But he coined the term. But the Great Debate actually had been around for thousands of years. The term Great Debate means the debate whether God exists or not. That's been around for a very long time. And so, like I said, it was kind of a predecessor to the Non-Sequitur Show where we wanted to have higher level discussions. Because I noticed with the atheist community, if you look at groups like the American Atheist, if you look at, I think has just become a far left woke group that I has nothing to do with atheism. But if you look at like the Atheist Experience and things like that, do they ever really talk about atheism? Do they ever talk about peer-reviewed papers? Do they ever talk about philosophers that talk about atheism like Mackey or Oppie or Draper or McCormick or Sobel or Snellingberg or any of them? No, they completely don't. What their entire show is predicated on is, I don't believe you. You haven't convinced me because there's egotist, and I'm going to hang up on you. That's not an argument. And so I wanted to have something a little bit elevated in that. So if you're interested in discussing topics where you just go beyond, oh, I don't believe you, and you'll stand by your convictions, because we all know Matt Dillahunty and Aaron Ra believe there are no gods. They've said this many times. But when you talk to them about it, they're going to default to, oh, I merely lack a belief, which is dishonest. It violates Grace's maxioms. It is intellectually dishonest. And I've called them out for it many, many times. And of course, they say I'm wrong, but they have no papers to prove it. right? I have all the evidence that supports everything I've said for the last 10 years. And a matter of fact, I don't know if you've read it, but I have one of the top 1% papers on academic EDU in philosophy of religion on this very topic. And it just got reviewed by Dr. Pai, who is a PhD in mathematics, and he had no issue with it. He found it to be correct. I had Dr. Demi, who's my paper was basically based on. He read it. He found no errors with it. And so I think I've well established that what I've said for years is correct, and that Matt Dillahunty and Oren Ra and those people are just catering to an audience at this point. They're not interested in really discussing atheism. I am. I find atheism to be fascinating. I think atheology is fascinating, even as an agnostic. But the atheist groups out there nowadays, none of them really deal with atheism. And I think that's unfortunate. So that was a great debate in a nutshell.
When I made my atheist video, I said, I have to ask Steve McRae if he'll critique on my atheism video. So
which one?
You're
did
I? Question. Yeah, you did.
Okay, cool.
The questions atheists can't answer video.
Oh, 10 questions atheists can't answer video.
Yeah. So it was basically responding to an SJ video. I know you know who SJ is.
Oh yeah. I've known SJ for quite some time. I look, it's so funny because I completely believe SJ is sophistic. I believe that she knows she trolls sometimes. She uses very poor argumentation. She's actually used fallacies, like legit affirming the consequent. I called her out on her once. I'm like, your argument is, the converse fallacy, and she's like, but it's still right. And I'm like, no, it's just not. That's not how any of this works. It's invalid. You can't have an invalid argument. Now, could your conclusion still follow? Yeah. If not, that's the fallacy, but it's still not an argument. If you have a logical formal fallacy, your argument is wrong. You might have a correct conclusion, but your argument is wrong. You can't use it. Don't do this. So I think that SJ tries, but I think she tries so hard because she wants this stuff to be true. And matter of fact, it's weird because she just recently converted to Catholicism. And I think, I don't know what she was before. I really don't remember. Let's say Baptist. I don't know what's Baptist.
She changed different churches for a little while.
But before she was like, I believe this is correct. Oh, wait, I was wrong. Now Catholic is correct. This is a problem because, sure, I believe people can change their position. I believe people can say, yes, I thought I was correct. I'm now believing that this is correct. I have no issue with that. But she's so adamant that she can't be wrong, right? You can't say, I believe this religion to be true and I cannot be wrong. And then years later say, oh, by the way, I was wrong about the religion. That just makes no sense because you're just pushing your ideology at that point. There are certain things you cannot be wrong on. I believe this. I cannot be wrong on the law of identity. X equals X. I cannot be wrong on what I use all the time as a litmus test for objective thinkers. If they disagree with this, I don't consider them to be objective thinkers after you present them the evidence. But 0.99 repeating in mathematics is equal to 1. They are the same exact number. There is no difference between them. It's like saying 1/2 equals 0.5. I cannot be wrong on that. Why? Math. Right? And so I'm willing to say that there's certain things you have certainty for, but religion is not one of them. You cannot have certainty in religion. I don't even think you can have knowledge on religion. I think that's even a very dubitable claim. But you certainly cannot say, I know for a fact that Christ is the risen Lord of God, and without him, no man can be saved. I don't think you can justify that as knowledge, and you certainly cannot claim it as a fact. That is just, in my opinion, absolutely wrong. You can claim it as a belief, and you believe it very strongly, and you can say it as my belief. I believe it as a fact, but you certainly cannot say that I am so correct on this that I cannot be wrong. That to me is a very poor epistemological framework. What I think you should say is, based upon what I read in this, I believe in Christianity. I accept Christ as my savior. I hope that is correct. And I'm not trying to push on anybody, but that's my position as of now. I have nothing wrong with that if people did that, but that's not what SJ does. She really comes across as she just cannot be wrong on it, which is weird. And I have no issue with her personally, but I think that adamant approach is a turnoff to people.
Well, that's something in my notes that Steve appreciates a good argument. Doesn't matter what it is, right?
Correct. Absolutely. That's what the Great Debate community was predicated on. That's what NonSequitur is predicated on. I'm involved in discussions all the time that people don't agree with, which is fine. But I'm getting a little more hardline approach. If somebody comes after me and they start using hyperbolic language, invectives, and pejoratives without addressing the comment or the argument, they're probably going to end up getting blocked. I just don't have the time for it. I spent 2 hours a minimum responding to people a day. I have multiple things on social media and emails, and I know a lot of people. And so I'm always talking about things. I don't have the time for it. Now, if somebody says, hey, Steve, you're wrong, here's all the evidence you're wrong, and it's actual evidence, and you're an idiot, I'll be like, holy shit, yeah, I'm an idiot, I've messed up, and I changed my mind. I have no problem with this. I've been wrong on things before. Everybody's been wrong on stuff. You cannot live your life and not be wrong. But you should only be wrong on a matter once, maybe twice. If it's something that is objectively true, then you can't vacillate. You can't say X equals X. Oh, wait, I was wrong about that. Oh, wait, I'm right about that. No, I'm wrong about that. We all know X equals X, right? And so when it comes to certain subjects you're learning about, you're going to get things wrong. I did this the other day. I had Noel Plum on, who I have the utmost respect for. And I had the UK flag as my avatar, and I called it the Union Jack. And somebody in my live chat said it's only the Union Jack if it's flying on a maritime warship. And I didn't know this. I was corrected. I won't make that mistake again. But I didn't say I couldn't be wrong. I didn't double down on it. I was like, yeah, I was an idiot on that because I don't know much about UK stuff. And I corrected it.
I was just gonna ask you, what's something that recently that you corrected yourself on that you were wrong about? And
that was yesterday.
You just answered it.
It was last night, actually. And I think that when you're presented with evidence, you should have epistemic humility to change your position. And there's nothing wrong with it. What happens is you have all these people on the internet that are so worried about their image that, for example, I'm convinced, and this is something that, again, my subjective opinion, but from what I have heard from other people and what I have seen, I'm convinced Aaron Raw and Matt Dillahunty know my work is legit. They know that my arguments are legit. They know my paper is logically valid and sound. They cannot refute it. They will not address it. They can't address it because that would undermine their entire position that they've had for years, and they would lose credibility. And I don't think either of them, one of them, want that, especially Aaron. Matt's a little less caring nowadays about his credibility, and he has changed his position, which, again, my subjective opinion, some of it based upon my writings, because whenever he talks about the term agnostic atheist, he seems to always mention my name or agnosticism, the agnostic on the internet kind of guy.
You're infamous.
Yeah, but the reason being is because I've written a lot about agnostic atheism. And matter of fact, I've just been communicating with my friend Dr. Josh Rasmussen. We might write about this. Then we might either talk about it. He might help rewrite the wiki page, or he just Josh and Graham Oppie and Majesty of Reason are now doing some Stanford Encyclopedia review on some of the ontological arguments. They're actually being reviewers. And I think that he's writing a paper with Joe Smith, which is the Majesty of Reason, great guy. And Josh has read my paper, and he has no issues with it. And he thinks it's a really good argument. And as soon as he gets done reviewing Stanford Encyclopedia, Dr. Rasmussen and I might work together on something, which would be amazing. I'd be thrilled to death because he's read my paper on it. He loves it. But when it comes to agnostic atheist, Matt Dillahunty agrees it is nonsensical. Especially in the weak case, he agrees that the diagram for it makes no sense. And the reason why he does that is because people that know him have explained to him that knowledge is a subset of belief and that my arguments have merit. But will he ever give me direct credit for it? No. What he'll say is, quote, paraphrase, quote, the agnostics are right about this, right? The agnostics. That's what he said on Twitch one time. He wouldn't use me my name. He's like, what the agnostics are right about is that agnostic atheism, it's nonsensical. But sometimes he'll mention my name directly. Like when he had a call on this particular topic, he said, yeah, I no longer identify as a Gnostic atheist. I am convinced it is nonsensical. I think the diagram is wrong. And then he starts going off on me personally. But Steve McRae is a mean poopy head. Nobody brought up my name. He just attaches my name with that argument because I'm one of the very.
And what do we say? And what do we say at the captive desk? Attack the argument, not the person.
Correct. Yeah, and I have extensive writings on the epistemic and the logical issues of agnostic atheism, and it's sufficient enough to even Matt goes, yeah, I have to agree. It makes no sense to say agnostic atheism, and he's been that way for a while. And so when people say, oh, agnostic atheism makes sense, and I'm like, okay, please put it in a logical schema where it is coherent, non-ambiguous, and nonsensical. Nobody's been able to do so. Nobody. And I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm not making that claim. But to date, nobody has made that ability. No, nobody's done it. And I will show that the schema they use, which is a multi-axis diagram where you have knowledge orthogonal to belief, doesn't make any sense because it should be linear. It should be single axial, because if knowledge is a subset of belief, why have it orthogonal? Why? It makes no sense to me. And that's one of the other. There's many issues, but certainty implies knowledge, and knowledge implies belief. You cannot be certain of P if you don't know it, and you cannot know something about the proposition if you don't believe it. These are all implicatures. And so the person who says they're agnostic atheist, I go, what? I have no idea what you mean by that. You ask 10 different people what it means, you get 10 different answers. It's ambiguous. It just doesn't tell me anything about your position. All I want to know is not anything about your knowledge. I just want to know, do you believe that some being exists from which the universe comes from? That's it. What's your stance on that particular position? Your belief stance. That's all I want to know. And so when they start throwing in all these obfuscations about I'm agnostic atheist, thinking that they're making sense or they're being more precise, they're not. They're absolutely not. Which, again, I hope to write more on that. If Dr. Rasmussen and I can really get together on that, that would be amazing, because I think that the whole wiki page is crap on that. So,
and the link to Steve's EDU paper is in the description, so check it out.
Oh, did you put it in there?
I did.
Thank you very much. It's I cannot believe it. That paper has been out a little over a year, and it has, like, I don't know, 2,300 views or something already. That's a lot for academic EDU, a lot. And I know a lot of people have used it in arguments on Facebook. I know, like I said, Dr. Pi cited it in his recent review of it. I know one other person.
You have a video up about that too. I know.
I do. One other person.
If you want to hear about that in the review, and Steve's got a video up, so go check it out.
Yeah, I did it with Dr. Pi. Yeah, he and I went through his blog, and he explained it, because he used Gensler's notation. I use Kripke notation, but it doesn't matter your notation, right? Logic's logic. I just prefer Kripke's notation because it's super, super simple. I sometimes actually I use Burgess Jackson's notation in my paper, but generally, if I'm just using general, I use Kripke's, and it's not that much different. But he uses Gensler notation, which I happen to find a lot more formal, but it means the same thing. And so somebody did write a ResearchGate paper on my argument, but me and a friend of mine, Landon Kurt Knoll, went through it and found massive issues, and even his Venn diagram was really confusing. So I think that person kind of backed off their argument against my paper. But if somebody finds an error in my paper logically, which, by the way, Dr. Pi found a minor typographical error, and I fixed it, and I thanked him for it, right?
Yeah.
And this was kind of some time ago. And honestly, I was uploading some corrections, some typographical corrections that I had in the grammar, and for some reason something just happened where it got screwed up. And so when he pointed it out to me, I'm like, how the hell did that happen? That's not how I originally wrote this, but I recognize it as an error. And the reason why is because logic is objective, and when you're looking at that and you go, yeah, that makes no sense, you don't go, hey, I think you're an idiot for pointing out an error. You go, oh shit, let me look into this, and you correct it. That's as simple as that. But I think it's correct now. The latest version doesn't seem to have any typographical issues. So,
well, before we talk a little bit about some of the guests you had on your channel, question for you: if you could have a discussion with anyone from the past or the present, who would it be and why?
Well, okay. And this is going to sound weird, but if Jesus did exist, I would be cool with that. And the reason being is, I would find out, if he was divine or not, right? If he existed or not, which would answer a major question.
You would actually ask him, unlike all the people that,
why
knew
not?
he was walking the earth that never bothered to ask.
What you got for me? I think it'd be interesting to see that he did exist. Because you could name any scientist or anything like that, but modern day scientists, they know what they know. There's really nothing that anybody in the past, I personally would go, oh, hey, I really would love to talk to this person, unless it would solve something for me that I could be solved no other way. And so, yeah, if Jesus existed, it probably would be somebody you may want to have a conversation with, right? I don't find a problem with that. And by the way, I do believe that there was somebody named Jesus. I'm not a mythicist. I think that Carrier's approach is weird. I'm not really heavy into Bayesian, so don't ask me about Bayesian stuff. I understand the concepts, but I think his approach for Bayesian by doing it historically makes no sense. It's not really how Bayesian is used, and he's been criticized for that pretty heavily by other people, like Bart Ehrman and a few other people. So, but I do believe that there was a root person that did exist, that from which the story of Jesus came from. It was called a historicist when it comes to that.
I would agree. I think there was somebody, but I don't think if he was here today, he would recognize anything that was written about him. And he certainly wouldn't go to church. He would probably head right for a temple. So,
yep.
And before we roll down, I wanted to do kind of a quick roll down of some of your guests. We have to touch on there was an unfortunate situation that occurred with the Non-Sequitur Show. A lot of us know about it, and we don't need to rehash it or rehash the emotions or anything. It was an unfortunate situation. Steve had a co-host, and there were some problems. If you want to know
some problems, that sums it up, right? Some problems.
If you want to know, if you do not know and you want to know, there's Steve has videos. Other people have talked about it. You can find out about it. We could talk about it for a long time, but for this interview, Steve, if you could do it over and give some advice to people who may have a partner, are thinking about getting a partner, or maybe your channel's blowing up big and you need to take on employees, and even if they're your friends or your family, what's your advice?
Get paid monthly. Get paid monthly. Yeah, I mean, people know that, my partner was lying the entire time. When it came out that he had kicked me and the producer Brulinator, who's no longer with us, which was one of the greatest people I've ever known, off the show, he lied to the audience. He tried to make it appear that I was committing some kind of medical fraud or other things like this. He lied to the court. It came out that he lied under oath. It came out that he submitted false bank records, literally false bank records, to the court. He photoshopped things. He changed the dates. He went into the PDF files and changed things. He got cited for criminal and civil contempt. He did spend 10 days, I think it was, in jail because of a $10,000 warrant out for him on criminal contempt. And so, I was fully vindicated. I got the show back. I won what's called a confession of judgment for $115,000 at 8% simple interest. So it's about up to $125,000. I'm still talking to my lawyer. We're pursuing avenues for collections. But I'm not going to go into the detail on that, but we haven't given up. And it just basically came out that everything he ever said was complete fabrication. And so my advice to people is, look, you have to be able to trust people to survive. And I did grow up, on a handshake. People say, well, you should have a contract. It would have made no difference. When you're dealing with somebody that dishonest, a contract wouldn't have mattered because he was willing to be deceitful and lie to people. I'm fine with contracts. I'm not saying don't get a contract, but my argument has always been it wouldn't have mattered when you're dealing with somebody that dishonest, right? Because they're going to do it anyways. They're going to break. He was found in breach of contract. We had a verbal contract. He was liable for unfair and deceptive trade practices, breach of fiduciary duty, and breach of contract. So there was a contract to be had. But my advice is get paid monthly. When I have co-host on, and they're somebody that I pay for, to be on for like a series. Like I did a show called Over and Under with Chris Attlee. I paid him monthly. There was never an accumulation of anything. I waited till the end of the fiscal year because I trusted him that he had a CPA, which he didn't have, that there was money in the account that did not exist. And I had asked a very dishonest YouTuber by the name, I'm going to call it out directly, by the name of Jimmy Snow, aka Mr. Atheist, which on my blog, I had said to him, because he kind of came up with the Non-Sequitur Show, not came up with the name, but he came up with the rising of the Non-Sequitur Show, I should say. I had asked him, I said, hey, Jimmy, if you ask Kyle, who is my partner, just see the books, to see there's money there, I will take your word for it. I will not disbelieve you, right? I was going to be very, very, I guess, congenial about it. He wouldn't do it. He absolutely refused to ask Kyle for evidence. And these are skeptics. And that to me was the hallmark of the atheist mindset back there. Ask everybody else for evidence unless it comes to people like me who was calling for evidence that he had the money, and they wouldn't even ask him. They wouldn't even bother. And I found that to be very dishonest. So my thing is, get paid monthly. That's my biggest advice, because I waited so long, and so he ended up getting tens of thousands of dollars, and just blowing it on drugs and trips and things.
And if there is a problem, you can nip it in the bud right then and there, instead of letting it build and build and build.
Correct.
Right?
Exactly.
Good.
Yeah.
Good advice. Remember that, people. You heard it from Steve. Don't let things go.
Yep.
All right, and then we said we'd talk for about an hour, so let me check the chat real quick, and then I wanted to ask you about a few of your guests, and then we'll wrap things up.
Yeah. Well, what was it? Which guests?
Well, let me just check through the chat here real quick. Make sure I said hello to everybody, and if there's any questions or comments that I missed. Maya's here. Hello, Maya. Logan, the lazy cat. Look at the trees. Always great to have you. I had interview with Look at the Trees. Go check that one out. It was a great talk. All right. Well, the chat is overly questioning. Tweet. Did you make a transphobe tweet, Steve?
Hell no. What's so funny is that I have a lot of transgender people that watch and subscribe and members of my channel. One of the things I actually put on the Non-Sequitur Show is that we are LGBTQ plus supportive. One of the reasons why I left the theism was because of this church's position on gay marriage. And so when people start using terms like transphobe inappropriately, it harms the trans community, because they're not going after the people that are anti-trans. They're going after people that dare question very specific dishonest actors in the trans community and in the gay community. And I think that's disturbing, because every group has dishonest actors. And I find that some of them, like, for example, like this one person named Jeremy Marsh, who advocates, he's a grown adult, and he advocates children go to his Patreon and talk to him about sexual topics without their parents being present. I have an issue with this. Everything he does reeks of what's called grooming. And just because he happens to be a gay man should not matter. He is a grown man talking to children. That is not bigoted. That is not transphobic. Somebody like Dylan, what's his name? Dylan Mulvaney, somebody who is a gay actor, I believe is a dishonest agent. I believe that they're playing a part to make a mockery of trans people, make a mockery of the trans community. Me calling that out is not transphobic. That is me calling out a dishonest agent. And so when you start calling people these hyperbolic terms, you're alienating the very people that are supportive of those communities. It makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense. It's like people throw around the word, racist all the time, when the people that are the most likely to be not racist are the ones being called that. There are overt racists out there that are evil people. The KKK, the white supremacist, the white Christian right nationalist. These are people that should be condemned. But when you have somebody whom you don't agree with, and you just label them, oh, you must be racist, you're not helping anybody. You're not doing anything but using pejoratives and invectives when you don't have an actual argument against what is being stated. My arguments are very clear on my Twitter. I believe that Jeremy and Dylan are dishonest actors. If you don't believe that, argue against that, but don't label something that a person is not. It does nothing to the discussion, especially when they're an ally, especially when their constituents are. My producer was gay. My partner was gay. Now, obviously, the transgender is a part of the LGBTQ, right? So you could be transphobic and still accept gay people. I get that, but my channel is very inclusive. I have a lot of trans people that agree with me against these people. So that doesn't make any sense to just throw out, oh, I disagree with this person, they're transphobe because they made some Twitter comment. No, explain why you think they're honest agents. That's what I want to know. Why do you think it's okay for Jeremy Marsh to tell children to go no contact with their parents and to talk to him about sexual issues that he loves bombs them, he isolates them, he tells them that he understands them, he thinks that they should get away from their parents? How is that not exactly what a groomer would do? Whether he is grooming or not, we can discuss that. But I don't think there's any rational argument to be say that is not what a groomer would do. And the fact he's gay makes no difference. It's a grown man. That's where the discussion lies. And I think a lot of people who don't have the intelligence or the articulation to talk about these issues merely want to derail them by throwing out these hyperbolic landmine terms. Oh, you're this, you're that. But that's not a counter argument. And it's unfortunate because it harms the trans community. It harms the LGBT plus community. It really does, because they're sick of it too. Caitlyn Jenner is calling out Dylan. She's trans. She even finds it to be offensive. She even thinks that, him portraying a 6-year-old girl is a little off. And when somebody tells me that it's perfectly fine for a grown man to talk about sex with children without their parents, I'm going to have a problem with this. If you want to label me a bigot for that, that's fine. But again, what does it have to do with them being gay or not? I couldn't care less. It is a grown man, period. I would be the same thing if he was straight. So yeah, I think a lot of people miss that point, and it's unfortunate because it really does make people very silly, and I think it alienates people that should be allies, and that's what's happening. We're seeing people that are more centrist, like myself, becoming more alienated and a little bit more aggressive because they're sick of it. They're sick of people treating them like they have no opinion that matters, rather than asking themselves, is it okay for a grown man to talk to children like this? That's the topic. And they have no argument against that. They're like, well, he's just asking them to do it. So what? That's not a retort. So I think that definitely, should answer the question.
I think you answered the question. And if anybody wants to discuss anything with Steve, all his contact information is in the description. You can contact him, and Steve would be more than happy to have you on. If you want to have a good discussion about something, go discuss it with him.
Yeah. And I think Dylan is a gay actor. I mean, that's what he's known for. He made a living mocking women. He was, he was a misogynist. He really makes, he went out of his way to parody women. And I think that's just his way of trolling. Now, if you disagree with that, that's fine. We can have a discussion. But that doesn't apply to any other person but this one individual. Matter of fact, like, look at the shop teacher that wear those, triple Z prosthetic breast. Everybody knows the shop teacher was doing that to troll. Everybody knows this. This is pretty well established. And so when you have somebody who's dishonestly acting to be something that they're not, to troll a community, I'm going to call that out. And if you want to disagree with me on that, that's fine. But that has nothing to do with being transphobic. Somebody had asked me, what happened if some other trans person was the representative? That would be, that'd be just fine. But they're honest to who they are, right? A trans person who is trans, they're honest to who they are. They suffer from what's called gender dysphoria. That's got to be something that's really difficult to accept and deal with. And I feel for them, and I'm happy to refer to them as she. Absolutely, right? There's no reason not to. But when it comes to a dishonest agent that I think is mocking people, that are trolling people, I'm going to say so. And it's only these two people that I really have issue with. Anybody else, whatever. I just wish they would have picked a better spokesperson. Caitlyn Jenner would have been better. Or I don't know whoever else. But why would you pick somebody that has a history of mocking women? That's just weird to me. That doesn't seem like a strong choice to say, I'm going to put this person up as a spokesperson when literally they have a history of mocking women. And that's not transphobic. So yeah, that's
well,
again. Yeah.
I asked the question and Steve answered the question. And again, if anybody wants to, disagree with Steve, get a hold
Yeah.
of him, and
Yeah,
feel
absolutely.
free.
I have email.
I
So does my
ask the
Twitter.
question, and
Yeah.
Steve stands up for himself, and he answers, like it or not.
I have
So,
a long-standing tradition.
so
Ask an honest question, you get an honest answer. If you come to me and you are asking in earnest a question and you want to talk about the topics, I will spend as much time as I need to talk to you about it. But if you come to me dishonest and you start with invective, I'm not going to waste my time because there's not a conversation to be had. You cannot reason with irrational people. And I'm having great conversations with very intelligent people on my channels and on my Twitter and on Facebook that are very engaging. And if you want to be a part of that, more power there to them. But if you sit there and start telling, I've had people tell my friends that are transgender, they're transphobic. That's fucking stupid. That's how bad we've gotten, where you're alienating transgender people merely because they agree with me. So I don't waste the time with those people. So if you're that kind of person, don't bother. I'm not gonna waste my time with you. But if you actually think that it is okay for Jeremy Marsh to talk about sex with children, I'll have you on my show. Come on, email me. I really like to hear your argument on that. I'm not even joking. I would love to hear that because I don't care whether he's gay or not. I care that he's talking to children about sex without their parents. That's the argument.
I put all of Steve's contact information in the description. So yeah, anybody in the chat that disagrees, feel free to contact him. I asked the question, and so
yeah.
Next question.
It's real funny too because I never block anybody who disagrees. I never have. I block people that disagree, that cannot have a articulate argument against it, and they just want to insult. That's not wasting everybody's time. I have friends I've known for 10 years on my Facebook that all the time we disagree on stuff, and they'll call me and they'll be like, "Hey, Steve, you're just absolutely wrong on this." And I'll be like, "Cool, let's talk about it." Right?
Here's a simple question for you: is young Earth creationism a grift and nothing more?
It is a grift with a lot of people. There are some people, like I believe that Ken Hovind is a grifter. Oh, you're against religion. That's the same type of argument, right? You must be, bigoted against religion. No, I'm calling out a dishonest player. Ken Hovind is a dishonest player. I don't think for a second he believes.
And Steve should know, how many times have you had
a lot? He's been on my show a lot.
Discussions with him over the years.
Yeah,
yeah.
He's been on a lot, and so I definitely believe that Ken Hovind is a grifter. I know his wife, very well. We talk. We were talking quite frequently. Cindy, she's been on my channel many times. I think the world of her, and I believe her. I believe that she was abused by Ken Hovind. And so, when you're asking, is younger creation as a grift to certain people, but there are other people out there that I know that really do believe it. And those people we can have conversations with. Right. I have so many younger creationists that watch my stuff that will tell me, yeah, Steve, I'm a younger creationist. I don't believe you, but I like listening to you guys talk about these things. Just like somebody who accepts evolution likes listening to these conversations. Why would not a younger creationist like listening to it if it's interesting dialogue? So my audience consists of I'm friends with Dr. Jonathan Sarfati online. We've known each other I think almost probably a decade or so. He doesn't agree with me on young Earth creationism, and he's really known for going after people, right? He doesn't talk to anybody that disagrees with him very much. We disagree all the time, and yet we've had polite conversations for years. He's even put my argument on creation.com. I'm actually mentioned in the Journal of Creation by Dr. Humphreys, who we don't agree, right? But he's a young creationist, right. And so it's all about the discussion. And so when people are personally attacking people and not the argument, yeah, don't waste my time. I'll tell you right now, don't bother. I won't remember your name tomorrow, and I don't care. It's simple as that. I enjoy the conversations I have with rational people like you and other people that want to have the dialogue, and I foster that, and I will continue to do that, and I'm happy doing it. And I got to tell you, right now, I'm probably in the best place I've been in a very long time. I'm working a lot. But I'm at a place where
you can see my notes, can't you? Because I was just going to ask you
at all. I can't.
I was just going to ask you how are things going now that I know the legal things aren't settled and everything, but did it sour you, or are you still enjoying the discussion?
I am because I bring on people that really want to have the discussion. I bring on people that I believe honestly believe what they believe. That's the big thing. Like, for example, if I talk to a flat earther, I want the flat earther to actually believe the earth is flat, right? I don't want somebody to come on and be a Poe and go, oh, I'm just messing with you. That doesn't do anybody any good, right? And by the way, just recently, Bob Nadell from Globebuster passed away. I don't know if you know that. We didn't agree on things, but I saw, what's so funny is I saw the respect from the anti flat Earth community overwhelm me by his loss, by his passing. There were other people that people didn't like. When Antonio Superrats, he passed, there was no outcrying because people knew he was towing. People knew that he was an idiot.
I felt bad when I heard that John Pendleton died. I love that guy. I mean, he was totally, I don't want to speak ill of the dead, but he was way out there. But he was so entertaining to watch, and I genuinely felt bad when he passed away.
He was from
John,
which one?
John Pendleton is chemist, mid-husband. He always had the white coat, the white lab coat on.
He was Logic did videos on him.
Logic, Logic was actually in contact with him because
I didn't know
he wanted to go on an expedition in Mexico and catch a pterodactyl.
Yes, I remember that.
And he was trying to raise money for it and everything, and then he passed away. He passed away. So
well, it just shows that even across the aisle, people have they have empathy, and so as long as a person really believes what they believe, I respect it. But if something like Jeranism, I don't believe Jeranism for a second believes the Earth is flat. And I'm going to call out dishonest agents again. There's a conversation to be there. People have opinions. This is the internet. If you don't like somebody's opinion, challenge it. Don't attack the person. If you are, you're not going to have a conversation with me or anybody of any relevance, and people aren't going to care because it's so easy to attack a person. It is much more difficult to attack an argument.
And speaking of somebody else we lost was the late, great Bill Ludlow.
Yeah, and it was so funny because Bill Ludlow had been on my channel. He had brought in Dr. Lawrence Krauss. And unfortunately, Bill Ludlow got a hold of some dishonest people towards the end, and not to speak ill of the dead, involved in my lawsuit. And unfortunately, we had a major falling out. But, for what he was able to do with, the topics he discussed, it was a huge loss. And it's sad that people had used his sickness to take advantage, I believe, of his mental state. It was not, people had said he just wasn't the same person. And I understand my dad passed and he wasn't the same person when he passed. The last few weeks, especially. And I had no idea that Bill was sick. I had no idea.
Nobody did.
I didn't know after he passed. And so people were like, oh, Steve's attacking Bill. I'm like, no, I went after things he had said, just like it would anybody else. It wasn't personal. Nobody knew that he was not doing well until he passed, which is so sick for people to weaponize the dead like that. Hell, I had people accuse me of murdering my producer after some of the dust was starting to settle on the case. People were, realizing that this was nonsense. I never met Bullinator, which again, one of the greatest guys I ever met. But there were people that were trolling. One of them even called the coroner.
I heard you also secretly live in Australia. Is that that was one of my more favorite ones. There is an Australian ballet dancer, but they're not even talking about him. There is a couple Australian Steve McRae's, and I happen to be friends with him on my Facebook page. But yeah, supposedly there was a person in Australia that they were saying that was me, and I'm like, man, this is some serious hardcore research here. Considering if you look at my Facebook that I've had since 2009, they're all from Coachella Valley and Southern California. I was born in Hollywood. So I've been there.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm just going to throw this out there because I see it, a couple people that I have blocked for being dishonest. You can't, when somebody says you harassed a person who was deceased and they use them to weaponize the dead, those people are disgusting. And that's why I blocked them, because if you're that evil to weaponize the dead, to say people were harassing somebody who was sick and that people didn't know he was sick, as you pointed out, you're a disgusting human being. And yeah, I won't have a conversation with you. That to me is just below the limit of ethical standards.
And Bill was just such a regular guy. I conversed with him on Facebook before I ever put two and two together who he was. Yeah, because he was just such a regular guy. And hey, how you doing? And and it was bam. There was the post. He was gone, and yeah, it was heartbreaking. Exactly. It really was.
Yeah. Yeah, and unfortunately, there's a lot of dishonest people on the internet. And Kyle fostered them, from the Non-Sequitur Show, and it's okay. They have no impact on my life now. I'm doing exceptionally well. I've been talking to a special person, which has been nice. And yeah, they have no effect on me.
You just mentioned a great discussion with Hugh Ross that you just had, and everybody should go and check that out. Hugh Ross pretty much dismantles Jason Lyle's and
absolutely,
Humphrey's arguments.
And I don't agree with obviously Hugh on religious issues, but he is an astrophysicist. He does know the science. So,
and also I know you like talking with Cy Gart as well.
I do, and he's a biochemist, and we don't agree again on intelligent design type stuff. What's so funny is, whenever I go on these types of channels and the trolls come out and just personally want to attack me and rewrite history, I know for a fact there are people that are out there that do know the history correctly, and those are the people that, of course, we're going to have conversations with. So again, if you want to have those conversations, knock yourself out, and we'll have those. But yeah, the people that don't, they're just so far in my rearview mirror. It's beyond. I just couldn't care less. I really can't. It's sad. It really is sad that they've reached such duplicity that they're so willing to attack an individual merely because they have a difference of opinion. When in the great community and on the Non-Sequitur Show, we foster that. Formed opinions are sacred. That's the difference between me and what I consider to be just your average run-of-the-mill troll.
And on that, can you name for me, who do you think are good debaters or who do present good arguments, atheists or theists?
Okay, on the theist side, I do like Inspiring Philosophy, Michael Jones. I think he just got like 300,000 he broke recently.
He's in my notes here. Yeah.
Yeah. He's been on my show. I really like him. I like Eric Hernandez. He's really good. I like, let's see here. I like Sygart. I wouldn't call him much of a debater. Let's see who else on the theist side. Josh Rasmussen is really brilliant. Luke Barnes is really brilliant. And then on the theist or the atheist side, obviously, you have your Drapers, your Oppies, and your, more academic ones. But as far as like the debaters for atheism, anything that doesn't involve Tom Jump. Let me think here. Who is really good? Man, I don't really know any really strong atheist debaters that actually go out there and argue against God. Most of them are just like, I don't believe you. You would have to like give me some names, and I'll. Oh, you know what? Joe from Answers and Reason. Trolley Dave from Answers and Reason. I really respect those guys. They really can explain things very, very well. Again, we're going to call them much as like debaters, but they are very informative. Yeah.
And speaking of, what debate format do you prefer?
Discussions. Yeah. And by the way, I will be doing a stream on one of my alt channels on one person that's in the live chat, because they went out of their way to make up a quote, literally like fabricated. It wasn't a misquote. They went out of their way to make up a quote that was a racist quote, and then said, I said it, and then said, there's a screenshot of it, and then decided to tag people like Aaron Raw, Matt Dillahunty, and other people that were co-hosts for the Non-Sequitur Show, which are called flying monkeys, to do their bidding. This is a dishonest tactic that people use. It wasn't, like I said, it wasn't a misquote. It was an actual fabricated quote that they tried to convince people that I said. That is what I think is the height of dishonesty. This is what I argue about. This is what I think it should be called out and exposed. And they'll still double down on it. They'll still triple down on it. That I find to be disgusting. If you do that to anybody, you are a disgusting person. I wouldn't do that even to a flat earther, right? You do not fabricate quotes and attribute them to people and then say there's a screenshot of them and then double down on it. I talked about this a little bit last night, but I'm going to be doing it a little bit more in the next few days, because that's kind of behavior. It not just destroys your credibility, it harms any kind of conversation when you're literally making up things like Kyle did, because Kyle fabricated things. My co-host for the Non-Sequitur Show, he literally got caught in the court fabricating records. This is no difference. This is dishonest behavior, and they get their flying monkeys to do their bidding. Steve's so evil. but not one of them can show my paper wrong. Not one of them could show why they think it's okay for a grown man to talk to children, behind their parents' back. They don't talk about any of that. All they do is just try to, attack me. But when you fabricate a quote, how do you justify that? How do you do that? I don't get that. I mean, do you think there's any reason to justify quoting somebody as saying something significantly racist and then saying there's a screenshot and then get your flying monkeys to come trying to attack them? Do you think that's okay, Dave?
It's a strong word. And if you're going to use it, you need to back it up.
I agree. Yep. So, like I said, if people are interested in the conversation, they don't know where to go. If not, that's fine too. I got a lot on my plate. I get messages all the time. I'm dealing with people all day long. It takes me hours to go through my social media. I got enough people to have conversations with. So the dishonest actors, they have no interest to me. They have nothing to add to a conversation.
And just to be clear, Steve is on here to do an interview, and I ask him questions, and he's answering the questions. And
I do. I love that.
If you like the answers, if you don't like the answers, I don't know what to tell you.
And by the way,
this is an honest discussion, and I hope everybody appreciates that and take it for what it is. Okay.
Yeah. This is where people get confused. For example, Hunter Biden's laptop says this dude has no credibility if he thinks trans people are gays faking it. Never said that. I said the opposite. One person, one individual dishonest actor, I believe, is being disingenuous. One. That what you have is what's called a hasty generalization. You're saying that because I think one person is, I must think all are. No, 99.99% of the trans and gay community are just people that want to live their lives. And I support them wholeheartedly. My channel has. Many of them support my channel.
And so does the captive desk.
One of them, when you have one dishonest actor, it screws it up for everybody. For example, like you had asked me about creationism, right? I believe that Dr. Safadi, Dr. Humphreys, Dr. Snellings, Dr. Tompkins, many of them I've had interactions with. I believe they actually believe it. I don't have to agree with them, but they're honest agents when it comes to at least their core beliefs that they actually believe it. You think for a second Eric Hovind or Ken Hovind believe their bullshit? I don't. If I'm wrong in that, so be it. But that is my opinion, and I'm allowed to call them out as dishonest actors. But there are individuals. That doesn't mean that all creationists are dishonest actors. Don't make the mistake because I find one person.
I've done the same thing.
To be dishonest,
most creationists, and I've talked. Well, I had an ex-creationist on to talk.
Yeah,
and it's not personal, but yes, when you're intentionally, willfully lying, spreading disinformation for money, then it's another topic and another. That's what you're attacking is the grift. They are grifting.
If I pretended to be a gay man merely to represent Grindr or a gay pride festival just to profit and get the attention, people should call that out. I find that to be dishonest. Right? What's the difference? And I've had people argue me, well, if you're acting, you're not doing anything wrong. It's okay for you to pretend to be gay if you're happy. I would argue that. If you're happy doing it, do it. This is their argument. I disagree with this. If you want to have a discussion on that, great. A discussion to be had, I guess. But I find somebody who pretends to be something they're not to be dishonest. Flat earthers who pretend to be flat earthers, I have a problem with. I'm consistent across the board. I call people out the same. And so if you think it's okay for a person to lie about being gay in order to get themselves in the, I know a woman who has told me she's never been with a woman. She will never be with a woman. She finds some women attractive, but she has convinced the community she's bisexual. That's not bisexual, in my opinion. There's guys I find to be attractive. Doesn't mean I want to sleep with them. I can say that's a good looking guy, but that's not my sexual interest, right? So I'm not going to say, oh, I'm in the gay community because I found some guy attractive. That's not how it works. But she's trying to lie to the community saying she's bisexual, even though she's actually mocked it and says, oh, it's disgusting. I can never do that to a woman. That's making a mockery of bisexual women. People should call that out. So if you think that's bad to call out that kind of behavior, yeah, you're nobody I'm going to want to talk to. That's just, I think you're harming the gay and trans community when you don't call out dishonest people like that. So
Well, there you go. You ask Steve, and there you go. He tells you. So,
And by the way, I didn't name the person who's doing that. By the way,
there it is.
You can go to my Twitter and figure it out, but I didn't name the person here. So
there it is. And again, and if you want to contact Steve about this stuff, all his contact information is in the description.
Yeah.
Get a hold of him.
And by the way, I'm not the only person that knows.
I'm not here to disagree with Steve. I'm here to interview Steve.
It's on my Twitter. People know who I'm talking about because they've seen the same thing. They know that this person has hundreds of thousands of subs, and so they know that they're lying. She was very clear that in public that she finds the thought of being with a woman to be detestable, but she wants to obviously she's the same woman that pretended to be Christian. She has actually said, "Oh, we were never Christian. We just faked it in order to get money from the church." That I find to be just as detestable. If you're an atheist pretending to be Christian to fleece the church, I got issues with that. So when you're a dishonest actor, because again, you're just doing the grift, that's something we talk about. I just don't think it's right. And she was open about that. She's like, yeah, we lied about being Christians.
I always have questions. I always have a question that goes up when people are converting all over the place, and every time they convert, they have their hand out.
Yep.
So
well,
it is a legitimate thing to ask that if somebody keeps converting and every time the first thing they put up is a Patreon,
yeah,
maybe they're only doing it for the money. Now, it doesn't mean they are, but it's reasonable to ask.
Hey, and let me ask you, Dave, when you contacted me and I said you can ask me anything you want, did I not? Did I block you?
No.
There you go. This is evidence that people are just full of shit. If you're an honest interlocutor, I will answer your questions. I will be direct as can be, but you have to be honest. You cannot just throw insults out there and expect me to take you seriously. You have to seriously.
And I told Steve before the show started that I've been a fan of the show over the years and everything they've done, but it doesn't mean I agree with Steve on everything.
Absolutely.
And Steve understands that. So,
but it's so funny.
That's just the way it is.
But you're living evidence that I didn't block you when you contacted me, and I did tell you, ask me anything you want.
Steve has been helpful with me. He's answered me when I sent him messages, even though he's busy and everything. So,
and that's why I have a following.
And he's never been rude or nasty with me or anything else.
I think I have a following because people have done that. They've come to me. I have one friend who I've known for some time, and he's just the other day.
If you've got a problem with Steve, then you've got a problem with Steve.
He said the other day, he's like, I'm afraid to ask you something, and I'm like, why are you afraid to ask me this? Go ahead, ask me. And he asked me. I was like, yeah, here's the answer. Look, I'm happy to answer questions publicly or privately. Anybody who thinks otherwise is lying to you, is absolutely lying to you, because my record stands for itself, because all these people will tell you, Steve answered my question. I went to Steve directly. I got evidence from him. All these people tell people this.
And speaking of, what do you have coming up? Is there anything special you got coming up? Any topics that you want to cover?
Well, like I said, I'm going to do a small episode on my alt channel on the person who went out of the way to fabricate a quote on me, because I find that to be so morally egregious. I can't even have words to describe. And so I'm going to be talking about that. I am going to be doing a review of a couple different videos. One of them is from Eric Hernandez. It's a little clip that he had on some epistemological stuff. I'm going to do a little critique on that video, I believe. And I'm going to do a critique on a friend of mine who wrote a blog entry called The Curious Case of New Atheism. He wrote some really interesting stuff that I wanted to talk about. So yeah, I'm basically doing video reviews. I do a lot of them. Like one of my more popular ones was Arn Ra talking to 3 Muslims. Arn is a great phylogenists. I mean, he's great in biology and stuff like that, but he just gets his ants handed to him on people that know a little bit about philosophy, which is a shame because, I don't know why he does. He's just wrong. And even experts, even atheists are like, dude, you're just wrong. So I look at these videos and I kind of just give my opinion on them. If people want to watch, great. If they don't, that's fine too. Welcome to the internet, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So anyways, hopefully people will, if they want to have a conversation, contact me. If not, that's fine too. Again, I've got enough on my plate where nobody wants to talk to me. That's fine. I'm okay with this. I've got enough people to have discussions with. But there are that few that go, damn, this makes sense. I agree with this. Or I don't agree with it, and I want to find out more. They're welcome to contact me. Absolutely. I got my email. I got my.
And you're welcome to contact me too if you want to come on and talk about anything.
Yeah.
get a hold of me. And like I say, I will talk with anybody civilly, just like we are doing right now. Yeah. Whether we agree or disagree.
Look, call me an asshole. My Twitter handle is A Holy Pope of Agnosticism. Call me an asshole. Call me an idiot. Call me a fucktard moron. I don't care when it comes to those types of don't label somebody, things like a racist or a bigot or transphobe when they're clearly not. That's not an argument. But at least tell me why I'm an idiot, right? If somebody says, "Hey, Steve, you're an idiot on this particular topic," let me explain to you why. I'll probably go, "Yeah, I don't know fuck all about that topic." I'm agree with, we're all inept in certain topics. There's certain topics I never discuss, even in science, because I know nothing about them. Right? I have no interest in them either. But all you have to do is say, "Hey, Steve, I all the time go read the comments on my videos. Hey, Steve, I think you're wrong on this. Oh, okay, let's figure out why." And they might say, "Oh, you know what? I've changed my position," or we might part, agreeing to disagree. Right? But go look at the comments on my videos. A lot of them are like, "I don't think this is right." Okay. But when it comes to like things like my philosophical arguments, when it comes to at least my paper, nobody's been able to show that I'm wrong on that. Right? We can agree to disagree, but nobody has actually shown that the paper's wrong yet.
And I think that's a great place to end things, is agree to disagree. And once again, if you want to engage with Steve, get a hold of Steve and engage with Steve.
Yeah.
Steve, thank you for coming on. I appreciate the discussion. I appreciate the tips. And I hope people will take your story for what it is and gain some insight into how to do things with others and how to engage with people and how to manage your channels and take it, take it or leave it.
Exactly.
Steve offered his advice. He gave the answers to my questions, and I appreciate it. And if you enjoy discussions like these, leave a comment below. I want to hear from you. Steve wants to hear from you.
Absolutely. And
hit me a subscribe with a bell so you get future notifications. And I hope to have many more discussions with people in the future. And I will see you then.
And thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you, Steve.